Brian, have you ever had a really stressful apartment hunting experience?
Oh, absolutely. When I was looking for my first apartment, I had no idea what to expect. I did not know what questions to ask, what to look for, or even how to read a rental listing. It was honestly quite overwhelming.
I know that feeling so well. Oh, hello everyone. Welcome back to Talk English Freely. I am Jessica and this is Brian. We are so happy you are here with us today.
It is great to have you, and as you can hear, we are already deep in conversation.
There is so much vocabulary involved in renting an apartment, and the whole process can feel very formal and scary, especially if you are doing it in English for the first time. So today we are going to cover everything, from searching for a place to signing a lease. If you enjoy our conversations, please subscribe to our channel and give us a like. It helps us so much.
We really appreciate every single one of you. Now, let us get into it.
Okay, Brian, let's start from the very beginning. When someone is looking for an apartment to rent, where do they usually start?
These days, most people start online. There are websites and apps where you can search for available rentals in your area. You can filter by price, location, number of bedrooms, and other features. A listing will usually include photos, a description of the apartment, the monthly rent, and contact information.
Right. And there is a lot of useful vocabulary in those listings. For example, studio apartment means a small apartment where the living area and bedroom are in the same space. A one-bedroom apartment has a separate bedroom and a living room, and utilities included means the water, electricity, or gas is already covered in the rent.
Those are really important terms to know. Another one is furnished versus unfurnished. A furnished apartment comes with furniture like a bed, sofa, and table. An unfurnished apartment is empty, and you bring your own furniture. And pets allowed or no pets tells you whether you can have animals in the apartment.
Good point. An available from tells you when you can move in. If an apartment says available immediately, you can move in right away. If it says available from the 1st of next month, you have to wait until then. Always check this carefully so there are no surprises.
Absolutely. And once you find a listing you like, the next step is usually to contact the landlord or property manager. A landlord is the person who owns the property. A property manager is someone hired to manage the building on behalf of the owner. You might send an email or make a phone call to ask about the apartment.
And what would you say when you contact them, Brian?
Something simple and polite works really well. For example, hello, my name is Brian. I am interested in the apartment listed at 45 Oak Street. I would like to schedule a viewing if possible. Could you let me know your available times? That covers everything you need in just a few sentences.
That is a great example. Short, clear, and professional. And once they confirm a time, you go to view the apartment. That is called a viewing or a tour. During the viewing, it is really important to look carefully and ask questions.
Right. There are a few things you should always check during a viewing. First, look at the condition of the walls, floors, and ceilings. Check for any cracks, water stains, or signs of damage. These could indicate bigger problems, like leaks or mold.
And check all the appliances too. Turn on the stove, run the faucet, flush the toilet, and test the lights. You want to make sure everything is working before you agree to anything. If something looks broken or worn out, now is the time to bring it up.
And do not be afraid to ask questions during the viewing. Good questions to ask include, how old is the heating system? Is there air conditioning? And how is the water pressure? You might also ask, is parking included? Or, is there a laundry machine in the building? These are all completely normal questions, and a good landlord will be happy to answer them.
Right. And Brian, what about noise? That is something I always forget to think about during a viewing.
Such a good point. If possible, visit the apartment at different times of day. A morning visit might seem quiet, but the evenings could be very noisy. You can ask the landlord, how are the neighbors? Or, is the building generally quiet? And listen carefully when you are in the apartment. Can you hear traffic outside? Can you hear the neighbors through the walls?
Those are such practical things to check. I once moved into an apartment that seemed perfect during the viewing, but it was right above a restaurant kitchen. The noise and smells were unbearable. I wish I had visited at dinner time before signing anything.
That is such a relatable story, and it is a great reminder that the viewing is your chance to gather as much information as possible. Once you sign the lease, you are committed, so take your time and do not rush the decision.
Totally. Okay, Brian, so let's say you love the apartment and you want to apply. What happens next?
At this point, you will usually need to fill out a rental application. This is a form where you provide your personal information, your employment details, and your rental history. The landlord uses this to decide whether to approve you as a tenant. A tenant is the person who rents and lives in the property.
Right. And many landlords also do a credit check, which means they look at your financial history to see if you pay bills on time. Some also ask for references, which are people who can vouch for you, like a previous landlord or an employer. You might be asked to provide their contact information so the landlord can call them.
You will also need to pay a security deposit when approved. It is usually 1 or 2 months of rent held as protection. If you take good care of the apartment, you get it back when you move out.
That is really important to understand. Always ask when and under what conditions will I get my security deposit back. And document the condition of the apartment when you move in with photos and written notes. That way, if there is ever a dispute about damage, you have proof of what it looked like when you arrived.
Taking photos on move-in day is one of the most important things a tenant can do.
For sure. And Brian, what about the lease? That is probably the most intimidating part for a lot of people.
The lease is the legal contract between you and the landlord. It outlines all the terms of your rental, like how much rent you pay, when it is due, how long the lease lasts, and what the rules are. Common lease lengths are 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years. Read every part of the lease carefully before you sign.
Right. If there is anything you do not understand, just ask. You can say, "Could you explain this clause to me?" Or "What does this section mean?" Never sign something you do not fully understand. Some leases have strict rules about guests, noise, or pets, so read carefully.
And pay attention to the notice period. This is how far in advance you need to tell the landlord if you want to move out. It is usually 30 to 60 days. If you leave without giving proper notice, you could lose your security deposit.
Right. And Brian, once you are living in the apartment, what are some situations where you might need to communicate with the landlord?
The most common one is reporting a maintenance issue. If something breaks or stops working, you need to let the landlord know. You might say, "Hi, this is Jessica in apartment 3B. The kitchen faucet has been leaking for a few days. Could someone come and take a look?" Always report problems in writing so there is a record.
That is such good advice. Sending a text or email creates a paper trail, so if the issue is not fixed, you have proof that you reported it. And you can follow up by saying, "I wanted to check on the status of my maintenance request from last week." Most landlords respond quickly when things are put in writing.
Another situation is if you want to make changes to the apartment. Some leases allow small changes, like hanging pictures or painting walls, and others do not. Always ask first before making any changes. You might say, "I would like to put up some shelves. Is that okay as long as I fill the holes when I move out?"
Right. And Brian, what about renewing or ending a lease? What should people know about that process?
When your lease is coming to an end, you have a few options. You can renew it for another term, switch to a month-to-month arrangement, or move out. If you want to renew, you would say, "I'm interested in renewing my lease. Could we discuss the terms?" The landlord may keep the rent the same or propose an increase.
And if you decide to move out, always give proper notice in writing. Something like, "I am writing to inform you that I will be vacating apartment 3B on the 31st of next month." That is formal, but clear, and it protects you legally.
And before you hand in your keys, do a final walkthrough with the landlord if possible. Go through the apartment together and note any issues. That way, everyone agrees on the condition before you leave, and you are much more likely to get your full security deposit back.
That is such a practical tip. And honestly, the whole rental process becomes so much less stressful when you know what to expect and how to communicate clearly. Every step has its own vocabulary and phrases, and once you learn them, you feel so much more in control.
Absolutely. Renting an apartment is one of those real-life situations where English really matters, and being prepared makes a huge difference.
Brian, I also want to talk about something that a lot of renters deal with: difficult landlords. Have you ever had a landlord who was hard to communicate with?
I have, yes. It can be really frustrating when a landlord is slow to respond or refuses to fix things, but it is important to stay calm and professional in your communication. Always keep a record of every conversation, email, and text message. If something is not being addressed, follow up in writing and be specific about the issue.
Right. Something like, "I reported the broken heater on the 5th of this month and it has not been repaired yet. Could you please let me know when this will be fixed?" Being polite but firm usually gets results. And if the problem is serious, like a safety issue, you may have rights as a tenant to escalate the matter.
Exactly. In many places, tenants have legal protections. For example, landlords are usually required by law to maintain the property in a livable condition. If they fail to do so, you may be able to contact a local housing authority. Knowing your rights as a tenant is just as important as knowing the vocabulary.
That is such an important point. And Brian, what about living with roommates? A lot of people rent an apartment and share it with one or more people to split the cost. That brings its own set of vocabulary and situations.
Great topic. When you share an apartment, you might all be on the same lease, or just one person might be the main tenant. It is important to understand which situation you are in. If you are all on the lease, you are all equally responsible for paying rent and taking care of the apartment. If only one person is on the lease, the others are usually called subtenants or subletters.
Right. And living with roommates means communicating well about shared responsibilities. Things like cleaning schedules and noise levels can become tension points if they are not discussed early. Having that conversation up front saves so many problems.
So true. You might say something like, "I just want to make sure we are on the same page about a few things. How do you feel about having guests over on weeknights?" Or, "Would you be okay with setting up a cleaning schedule for the shared areas?" These conversations feel awkward at first, but they make living together so much smoother.
For sure. And Brian, what about subletting? That is when a tenant rents out their apartment to someone else temporarily.
Subletting is quite common, especially when someone travels for work or goes away for a few months. You would find someone to stay in your apartment and pay rent while you are gone, but it is very important to check your lease before you sublet. Many leases require the landlord's permission. You might need to say, "I will be away for 2 months. Would it be okay for a friend to stay in my apartment and cover the rent?"
Good to know. Subletting without permission could get you evicted, so always check first.
Right. And when you do sublet, put everything in writing: the rent amount, the dates, and the condition of the apartment.
Absolutely. Brian, let us talk about moving out. What should people do to make sure that process goes smoothly?
First, give your notice on time and in writing, as we mentioned, then start preparing the apartment for handover. Clean everything thoroughly, repair any minor damage you caused, and remove all of your belongings. If you painted a wall a different color without permission, you may need to paint it back.
And do that final walkthrough with the landlord if at all possible. If they try to charge you for pre-existing damage, your move-in photos are your proof. That documentation is so valuable.
It really is. Moving out on good terms is always better than leaving on a bad note. You may need a reference from this landlord for your next apartment, so do your best to leave the place clean, return the keys on time, and say goodbye politely.
And that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We hope this conversation gave you the confidence and the vocabulary you need for your next apartment search. You are more prepared than you think.
Remember, it is always okay to ask questions and take your time. Never feel rushed when making a big decision like renting a home.
We would love to hear from you. Have you ever had a memorable experience looking for or living in an apartment? Leave a comment below and tell us your story.
And if today's conversation was helpful, please give us a like and subscribe to Talk English Freely. Your support means everything to us.
See you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.